Thank you so much, Jing, for the kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for coming. So my fundamental view of computing as a platform that can accelerate how we do science, where we do the science, and who does the science changed 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I was an undergraduate student at a small university in Kenya. That time, I didn't own a computer, but I was deeply interested in biological questions around DNA, which I am to this day. And I wanted to experiment and test new ideas of how HIV interacts with certain DNA sequences that look like viruses in the human genome. I shared this idea with several professors. They said, you can't do this idea. But it came to me, even without owning a computer, that what if I could test this idea on a computer? And yes, I did. Even though I didn't own a computer, I could go to a cyber cafe for $1 an hour. I could use the internet, the dial speed internet. And with that, I tested a hypothesis, a new hypothesis of how HIV could interact with retrovirus-like elements that constitute 10% of the human genome. I share this story because to me, it became a very important lesson. Within a few months, I was able to test this new hypothesis, present it at a top conference for chemotherapy in the US, thanks to Anthony Fauci, who I contacted by email in 2002 as the head of the NIH AIDS division. Coming to the US, I came to realize, meeting scientists from top pharma companies like Gilead, that, science and indeed human biology is so complex that nobody, no matter what company you work for, can know everything. And I shared this idea with many of the scientists there. And that really became my foundation because I realized that if you have an idea and if you have a computing platform where you take science problems into computational problems and solve them at the speed of computing, you could eventually solve scientific problems incredibly fast. And so for the past 20 years, my research has been, how do you leverage computing as a platform to accelerate science? My primary research is computational biology, and I have also worked as a scientist at IBM research, developing tools that can accelerate how we do computational research. And so this is why I'm excited by, large language models. And today I'll share some of the work that we're beginning to do to examine how we can leverage advances in large language models to accelerate how scientific findings are adopted by organizations that are implementing complex projects. So for disclosures, I'm a founder of a number of startup companies, many of these in the biotechnology space, and also hold equity in some of the companies, and I've received consulting payments from companies such as Google Research. So my research on LLMs focuses on a couple of areas. So all the way from where I started, I remain primarily a computational biologist deeply interested in how we can advance our understanding of human biology using computational approaches. So my work leverages LLMs as tools for capturing complex relationships in biological data. One of the fundamental constraints of computing, is that to solve anything on a computer, you need to transform it into a digital problem. So the idea of how do you take complex problems in science in the world and represent them in a digital form is very fundamental to computing. And I use LLMs as tools to explore how we can represent complex biological information and use it to drive discovery. But today I'll specifically share the work that we're doing as part of the new initiatives we're calling Ecosystems, Finance, and Health. And our vision is to build an investment case for the co-investment on ecosystems, public health, and biodiversity management. So often there's a focus on either public health or biodiversity or climate change issues. But we believe that there's an investment case to be made that connects all of these three issues so that there can be beneficial outcomes, not only for climate, not only for biodiversity conservation, but also financial outcomes. This is an initiative that brings together several organizations. So we have 4 co-directors. So myself, Jim Cecil, who is a scientist at the Smithsonian Institute, and my colleague Joseph Kamau at the Kenya Primate Research Institute in Kenya, and Jacqueline Eng, who has been working in the nature finance space. And we received funding from the Yale Planetary Solutions, which is a new initiative at Yale looking at how to transform climate-related initiative. As the ecosystems, finance, and health initiatives, we are focusing on 3 areas. First, we are envisioning a tool that we call an intelligence platform that could enable organizations that are making decisions on biodiversity management or ecosystems management as well as public health to leverage scientific evidence in their decisions. So these decisions could involve policy, they could involve financial decisions like investments, both from governments or private investors or foundations. We also envision having living labs, which are areas of the world where we partner with organizations to experiment on how an intelligence platform could drive the implementation of complex projects on biodiversity management, and eventually a financing hub working with financial institutions, both those which are foundation-oriented as well as those which are venture-oriented. So as part of our long-term goal towards an intelligence platform, we organized an innovation sprint. So we called it a sprint here because the idea was to bring together a group of people for a few days to try and push the boundaries of what we can do with generative AI in trying to leverage scientific evidence in addressing problems in ecosystems management. So this sprint, or you can say hackathon for those in data science, brought together a couple of key institutions. So here at Michigan, as well as our partners at Smithsonian Institute, the Primate Research Institute in Kenya, and the Science for Africa Foundation. We also are very interested in working across boundaries. So for example, aside from academia, we know that, there's a very vibrant startup community that is growing all over the world, especially with generative AI. So we also partnered with an innovation hub in Kenya called iHub that provides an incubator space for leading startups in the country, as well as AI Kenya that brings together over 8,000 scientists from across Kenya. We also invited a couple of speakers and technology facilitators, again drawn from various backgrounds. So here at Michigan, we are fortunate to have the Michigan AI Lab and a graduate student here, Angana Bora, who is among the audience, joined us in Nairobi for this hackathon speaking about AI agents. We also had a couple of participants or facilitators from industry, including LLMs Health, IBM Research, Microsoft Research, and Netflix, speaking about AI product development. And importantly, we brought together also domain partners in the space of biodiversity conservation and nature finance, so including the Nature Conservancy, Nature Finance, which makes investments in nature-based solutions. And in terms of foundations, we also partnered with the Science for Africa Foundation and had some participants from the Gates Foundation. So to make this innovation sprint possible, we had to ensure that we can bring together innovators who are experimenting with the latest tools in generative AI, And we're able to identify 33 scientists from Kenya, so ranging from one or two being university faculty. We had students. We had founders from startups. And many of these participants brought different kinds of expertise into this innovation sprint. So, for example, we were very keen in having innovators who are really experimenting with developing applications that interact with application programming interfaces of LLM platforms such as OpenAI. So we see that most of our participants were very familiar with working with LLM OpenAI APIs that allows you to programmatically access the GTP4 GPT models behind ChatGPT, but to use them in a very context-dependent way. So, in addition, we broke the participants into 6 teams, and again, ensuring that we have a diversity of expertise in each of these teams, so that they could begin to experiment with new ideas. So, the overall goal of this sprint was basically to demonstrate whether we can contextualize the responses of LLMs to specific contexts, especially in public health. And this is towards the long-term goal of providing a mechanism for decision makers who may not be scientists, but who may want to leverage scientific knowledge, say, for example, in a scientific paper. So if you're designing a project that is managing an ecosystem, and we know that there's a lot of scientific papers published examining the impact of different conservation measures. Can you use the knowledge in that paper to inform your decision without reading the paper, without being able to understand the science in the paper? So that was one of our goals. The other goal is that basically, there's 2 aspects of science. So one aspect is, the synthesized science, which is, scientific papers, right? The other aspect is primary data. So if I'm managing a project to conserve the environment, and I have some database. This could be, a database of climate, a database of soil conditions, and I want to know what is the best crop to grow in this region using this data, and I don't know how to analyze the data. Can I ask a question that basically, can I ask a question to an LLM system that then analyzes this data and generates a response that is informed by the data and science, and give that answer to advise my project. And this is in line with, an exciting area that some of the speakers spoke about yesterday, and which I work on, which is on how do you leverage generative AI to accelerate scientific discovery. So we've seen a lot of, progress in being able to have AI scientists that can, for instance, design chemical experiments and even send it to a robot to, do the experiments. We've seen just about 2 months ago, OpenAI released deep research that allows you to ask questions that involve, the LLM going on the web and getting some data sets or documents and giving you, a meta-analysis of what's out there. We've seen actually, so Eric Schmidt has invested heavily in Future House, which is a non-profit that is trying to develop an autonomous scientific system over the next decade, especially focused on biomedical research. And just a few weeks ago, Google Research also released their AI scientists. So we are seeing all of these advances, that are going to enable us to leverage generative AI to accelerate science. One of the bottlenecks with science, of course, has always been how to translate the science into real-world solutions. Can we not only accelerate science, but also accelerate how the outputs of science are used in the real world? So that is an area where we are particularly interested in. So the work we're trying to do with the intelligence platform is related to the AI co-scientist idea, but it's also different in the sense that we are focused on end users who are not necessarily scientists. So can we have a virtual scientist that can work together with somebody who is not a scientist to analyze scientific data and give them results? So even if you're not a scientist, you might have some questions, that can be answered with science. Can we bridge that gap so that you are empowered to answer those questions without being a scientist? So behind many of these approaches for enabling LLMs to contextualize responses to domains, because we know that general purpose LLMs like ChatGPT have been trained on large corpus from the internet that is not very domain specific. So to customize these LLMs to very specific domains, there are different approaches. The simplest approach is known as retrieval augmented generation. And basically, it involves providing the LLM with some context which can come in form of documents. The other approach involves empowering LLMs to use other tools. So the LLM, for instance, instead of just generating an answer, the LLM can go to a browser, search the internet, and find the information that you're looking for. So the hackathon we organized, again, was focused on two tasks. One is to enable LLMs to contextualize responses to scientific papers and technical documents. And then the other task is to enable LLMs to interact with databases or tabulate data so that even if you're a non-scientist, you can be able to gain some insights from your data. So I'll try to go fast. I thought it's 30 minutes. Maybe it's, is it 30 minutes? Like the total talk time?
You still have about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So I'll try to be fast. So we utilize a technical infrastructure that allows the 30 data scientists that came to the hackathon to write code collaboratively, and at the same time, we provide them with access to multiple LLM models through a platform known as Together AI. So I'll just quickly summarize that from this hackathon, which was just held 2 weeks ago, we saw these local innovators actually using some approaches that are also used by big companies. So in terms of the technical approaches, and then I'll be available to share this in detail with anyone who is interested. We saw that the teams are using a variety of approaches in order to tackle these issues. And importantly also, in terms of evaluating some of the results coming from the teams, we partnered with domain partners. So for instance, the Science for Africa Foundation provided us with a data set of thousands of grantees. And the idea basically was to build an LLM system that can answer specific questions provided by the funder so that they don't need to go through the databases to answer these questions. And in terms of the key lessons, so the task that we're trying to address involves using LLMs to analyze a scientific paper or analyze data. And one of the things we quickly realized that LLMs are not good at images, right? You can enable them to interact with images. So if you have a scientific paper, you might have an image, you might have tables, and the participants in the hackathon were able to come up with ways of enabling LLMs to extract the images and summarize the information in the image, look at the table, look at the data in the table, be able to answer a question that involves that table. And one of the teams was even able to develop a way of referencing a specific section of the document where the answer has come from. So for instance, you could have an answer that says that based on figure 4, the effect size of doing this intervention on this ecosystem is this. And in addition, some innovators were able to also enable the LLM to also go to the internet and augment the contextual information provided with what's available broadly in the internet. We had some awards for the best performing team, but importantly, every team won. So we had some award for every team, and then thanks to Angana and the Michigan AI lab, we also had a fun LLM knowledge game, and we're able to give some awards for that also. So thank you very much, and I can take any questions at this time.
Okay, I'll ask the first question. You're a co-scientist helping non-scientists making decisions and policy-related assessments. How are you doing? How are you? I would say, how are you building sort of the communication between the non-scientists and the scientists and the AI co-scientists now, or how do you envision this in the future?
Yeah. So what I envision is that for the non-scientists, right? That the non-scientists can have access to a tool, right? That if, let's say, you're trying to figure out whether it's better to plant a particular type of crop, or maybe you are a funding organization and you have a bunch of proposals proposing to different ideas of how to address biodiversity loss, right? So the idea is basically that this LLM system would take in the proposals, right? And then look at those proposals and utilize a database of some literature, right? To see whether what is the scientific basis of some of the proposed ideas. So of course, the way we do this now is we have peer review, right? And this can be one way of augmenting peer review. But I think importantly is also bringing that review process closer to the people making the decisions. So if you are a venture capitalist, right, you're not going to get peer reviewers, right? You have to do some assessments that might involve, looking at competitors, looking at whether this makes an investment case in terms of other alternative strategies of addressing the same problem. So we see that having this kind of platform could help in that. Of course, we're not saying that scientists are not important, right? So my first passion is a scientist, right? And we have a lot of scientists in our group. But basically, scientists can also use the platform to see, where are the gaps, where they should focus on. Yeah.
Thanks. So maybe it was just something I missed, but is it safe to assume that the choice of a RAG solution was a constraint placed on all the teams, or did all the teams arrive at using a RAG architecture for solving the challenge?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So most of the teams, there's some element of RAG, but the different ways of implementing this RAG process. And what we saw, when an LLM takes a document that you're trying to contextualize your responses to, right? It needs to process that document, right? So there's different ways of processing that document. So for instance, for the winning team, they did what's called semantic chunking, right, of the document. So basically, you can take a document, and by semantically chunking, you can divide, let's say, sentences in the document, embed those sentences in some vector. So there's embedding vectors, and then compare all the sentences to see which sentences make sense to bring all of together into one group, right? So you group them semantically. And the winning team was able to, to do that. And there are several strategies of doing that. I think what was innovative, is that when you do RAG out of the box, right, you may not do things like using an external tool. So for instance, one team had an AI agent that performs a web search, right? And once it performs the web search, it takes the information from the web, informed by the contextual document, and then combines the information from the web with this internal document.
One follow-up question. What was the duration of the sprint? I'm not sure that was mentioned.
So it was only 3 days. 3 days. Oh. Yeah. So actually, what's incredible about these sprints and why we do them, right, is that actually, in 3 days, they probably did things that you'd probably take a year, right? Because normally when you have this kind of projects, the first few months probably is just like figuring out, how do I like install things, keep things like running, right? But we compress it into 3 days so that, people can be focused on the task. We provided them with an environment that, is also used by big companies because it has access to over 200 generative AI models. We give them like a compute platform so all of them can do the computations there. We were able to, have like a shared programming environment where we can basically, look on the progress, right? And we can able to run their code even as they write it, right? So this allows us to innovate very quickly. But of course, because of that, probably this is not, the best solutions they can build, but it gives us insight in experimenting with the different architectures, different ways of doing everything, right? So they did many experiments that if you are a PI, you're running a lab, you can't do all of those experiments, right? If you're a big company with a software development team, you can't experiment all of these, variations. So this is one of the advantages.
Okay, thank you so much.